everyone. My name is Sheila Scolaro, and I'm the Public Outreach Specialist at the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. This is a short webinar to provide information on the Bay Mini Grant Program and how you can develop a competitive proposal. After listening to this webinar, if you still have questions, feel free to contact me at the email address provided. Before jumping into the Bay Mini Grant Program and how you can improve your chances of being awarded, it is important for you to understand who we are and our program goals. Tampa Bay was designated an estuary of national significance by Congress in 1990, and it is now one of 28 declared estuaries of national significance around the country. This designation laid the foundation for the creation of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. Our job at the Tampa Bay Estuary Program is to build partnerships to protect and restore Tampa Bay through the implementation of a scientifically sound, community-based management plan. This plan reflects our evolving knowledge of estuary processes and community needs and is broken down and centered around three programmatic priorities: clean waters and sediments, thriving habitats and abundant wildlife, and informed, engaged, and responsible community. One way we achieve our goals is through our Bay Mini Grant Program. Bay Mini Grants are competitive cash awards up to $5,000 provided to community organizations in the Tampa Bay watershed for projects that address restoration and education priorities in Tampa Bay. The goal of this grant program is to empower citizens to foster an environmental ethic and to promote community stewardship of the Bay. This is a vehicle to involve community members in Bay restoration and education about important issues affecting the estuary. The community has been at the center of Tampa Bay's restoration story since the 1980s. The Bay Mini Grants are an opportunity to continue that tradition by providing seed money for grassroots organizations who are working to protect and restore Tampa Bay. If you have driven around the watershed, you have likely seen the Tampa Bay Estuary Specialty License Plate, coined the Tarpon Tag. Sales of this plate exclusively fund the Bay Mini Grant Program. To be eligible to receive Bay Mini Grant funding, organizations must be within the Tampa Bay watershed. This includes areas of Pinellas, Manatee, Hillsborough, and parts of Pasco counties. Both for-profits and nonprofits are eligible to apply. A federal employer identification number or state tax exemption is required for disbursement of grant funds, so funds will not be awarded to individuals. Applicants may submit as many proposals as they like. However, only one proposal per applicant or organization may be awarded. Proposals for the same project will be funded no more than 2 times in a 5-year period. And if awarded, Bay Mini Grant funding can only be used for the items listed on an approved budget and purchased after the purchase order start date. Grant funds cannot be used for projects on private residential property unless there is public access, a conservation easement established, or the property has a direct link to Tampa Bay. Additionally, for a project to be eligible to receive funding, the project must focus on one or more of our 8 programmatic goals. These program goals are explained in further detail along with examples of possible projects in our Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, also known as our CCMP. This can be found on our website. Keep in mind that one of the missions of the Bay Mini Grant Program is to involve the community in bay restoration and protection. Therefore, your project should not only address one of the program goals, but also should have a strong volunteerism component that is central to the project's establishment. To strategically work through our CCMP, TBEP highlights a specific action from the plan to prioritize for Bay Mini Grant funding each year. In 2021, priority will be given to cost-effective projects that address or expand green infrastructure practices. One of the missions of the Bay Mini Grant Program is to involve the community in bay restoration and protection. Therefore, priority will also be given to cost-effective projects that promote public involvement in bay restoration and protection, or promote public education about key issues affecting Tampa Bay. For a current list of Bay Mini Grant priorities, be sure to visit our website. On our website, you will find the link to the Bay Mini Grant information packet. This packet is revised each year, and its availability marks the official request for Bay Mini Grant applications. Interested applicants are highly encouraged to review the updated packet in entirety each year before starting an application. It provides you with an abundance of information and guidance on how you can develop a competitive, fundable project. In this information packet, you will learn that each application requires a scope of work, a budget, and letters of support from each partnering organization. All of these materials will be submitted using an online form. Emailed applications will not be accepted. Every project application must be accompanied with a scope of work. A scope of work should describe the who, what, when, where, and how of the proposed project. It should be less than 3 pages, but provide a detailed outline of how the project will be completed and what the project outcomes will be. Attached to the information packet is a scope of work template. It is highly encouraged that applicants use this template to guide the development of their project scope of work. There are 3 main components of a Bay Mini Grant scope of work. The first is the project title. Be sure that the project title remains consistent through the entire application. This includes the online application, the budget, and the submitted letter of support. The project narrative is also a critical component of the scope of work. This provides a detailed summary of the proposed project activities and the outcomes. The scope of work template provides specific questions to guide your development of a strong, detailed, and concise project narrative. And finally, the scope of work includes project deliverables. These are specific quantitative performance metrics and clear, measurable restoration or education outcomes. These metrics should support your evaluation of the project's success in achieving stated goals. Examples of measurable metrics include number of plants installed or acres of land restored, the number of volunteers at each event, or the total weight of trash collected or number of invasive species removed. In a scope of work, these metrics are typically outlined in a bulleted format. Please keep in mind that the proposed scope of work may be modified based on findings and input from the TBEP Management Conference. However, the scope of work will be reviewed and approved by both the Tampa Bay Estuary Program and the applicant before the project begins. Project proposals are judged based on these specific criteria. Use this information to guide the development of your proposal. Judges will use this exact same rubric when reviewing each of the applications, so be sure that your scope of work and budget answer each bulleted point. For the full list of the Bay Mini Grant criteria, download the information packet and review it in entirety. In addition to the scope of work, each project application should be accompanied by a project budget. The project budget details exactly how grant funds will be spent. The project budget should be descriptive and present expenditures as an itemized list. Expenditures may include things like plants, which should have the names and sizes, and they must be Florida native. You can also include paid labor, specifically to contractors, municipalities, or other private organizations. You should also include supplies like shovels, trash bags, or masks for volunteers, as well as equipment. If the budgeted item exceeds $500, you should include 2 quotes. All sources of funding and match commitments should also be included. Remember that the budget should not exceed $5,000. While match funds are not required, it is highly encouraged and should be included if you would like to develop a competitive application. Some examples of match funds include cash, donation of plants, or donated use of equipment. If you include donations, cash, or other grants, be sure to specify who or what organization is providing this donation. You can also include volunteer labor as a match. As of 2020, volunteer labor is valued at $26.32 per hour per volunteer. Costs not included or allowed on your project proposal includes ongoing funds for administrative support of established programs. Costs also not allowed include reimbursements for costs outside of the grant's scope of work, purchases of commercial software and hardware, contingency funds, and attendance at conferences, meetings, or lobbying expenses. Food costs and mileage reimbursements are allowed in your grant application, but be sure to review the information in the packet if you plan to include either of those items on your budget. Salary costs are also allowed, but must be less than 10% of the total requested budget. In each of the budget templates, you will see a line item for a sign shown here in the top right corner. Only some restoration projects are appropriate to include a sign at the project location. The sign promotes both your project, the license plate, and the Bay Mini Grant program. If appropriate, you can choose either an indoor or an outdoor sign, and it should be added to the final cost of your grant. If awarded, Bay Mini Grant recipients will be required to submit quarterly progress reports, as well as a final report. Quarterly reports will be submitted electronically. If funded, the grantee will be required to also submit invoices and receipts. Invoices will not be reimbursed until all outstanding quarterly reports are received. Bay Mini Grant recipients will also be required to track success metrics and submit information as part of the final report. Recipients with projects that involve data collection, including water quality, trash data, microplastic data, or volunteer metrics, will submit data files with the final report. All projects must be completed within 1 year of receiving a purchase order from the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. The deadline to apply for a Bay Mini Grant is the 4th Friday of September. In 2021, the deadline will be September 24th, 2021. Be sure to check the Bay Mini Grant webpage for grant deadline information specific to the year in which you are applying. After the September deadline, all eligible applications are collated and sent to a review committee made up of the Community Advisory Committee members. They review each application and submit their findings to the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Executive Director. The Executive Director then takes these findings and makes a recommendation to fund specific projects to the management and policy boards, who make the final funding approval. To apply for a Bay Mini Grant, be sure to complete the online Bay Mini Grant application. Remember to attach your scope of work, your budget, and your letters of support. Before you start answering the online application questions, be sure to review the application packet. To access this information, you can click the link in the header. After reviewing this information, you can start answering the questions in the online portal. Be sure to include a project name. This should be similar to the project name and the project title that was included on your scope of work, as well as on your budget. You should also identify whether your project is restoration or education or both. Identify which CCMP goal your project is associated with. Note that your project may be associated with more than one CCMP goal. Include a project summary, which should be less than 4 sentences. This just gives us a brief idea of what the project is about. Also include the city and county of the project location. If your project is a restoration project, be sure to include the physical location. This can simply be the project address. Also include an estimated community reach and the total amount of funds requested. The total amount requested should include the cost of your Tampa Bay Estuary Program tarp and tag specialty license plate sign and should not exceed $5,000. The Tampa Bay Estuary Program often receives grant applications in excess of the funding available, so please be sure to include an explanation of how partial funding would impact or affect this project. If you have applied for other grants, be sure to include the name, the amount requested, and the status of those grant applications. Include the name of your organization and the type of organization that it is. Next, include your federal ID number or state tax exempt number. Include your organization's mailing address. If awarded, this is where reimbursement checks will be sent to. Include the director's name of your organization, the director's email address, and the director's phone number. If the project manager is different from the organization director, include their name, email address, and phone number below. List all organizations, groups, and volunteers that will be participating in your project. We also recommend letters of support from each of the participating organizations. Identify whether or not you have received a Bay Mini grant in the past, and if you have, identify which year. And finally, let us know how you heard about the Bay Mini Grant program. Before submitting your application, be sure to upload all of the files associated with your application. This should include your project scope of work, your project budget, and letters of support from partnering organizations. If you have any other materials you would like our review committee to see, you can also upload those here. These may include photos or plans of your rain garden. You can also identify if you would like a copy of your responses before you submit. Thank you for tuning in to the Bay Mini Grant webinar. For information and all downloadable packet materials, be sure to visit our website.